I reject this notion that open source is in some sort of crisis, that there's a funding crisis, that we have to spend more. No, we don't. There is no crisis.
Hey gang, my name is Chad Whitacre, head of open source at Sentry. Thank you for joining me on my quest to discover the true meaning of the gift of open source. This episode has 3 acts. Act 1 is the setup. I introduce a framing device, which is me in a hat in a bar, wrestling with my doubts about open source and watching a couple YouTube clips. The first clip is an echo of episode 2 to give all you newcomers a little taste of OpenPath backstory. The second is a primer in economics, so we're all on the same page. Act 2 is where I leave the bar and go out into the world, and this is the part where I dive deep into David Heinemeier Hansson's perspective on open source, and honestly, how my story is intertwined with his. In the final act, Act 3, spoiler alert, I go on a little road trip to try to make peace with some of my own doubts about open source that I introduced back in episode 1. If that sounds boring, now's your chance to bail. If you're still here, please enjoy episode 3 of OpenPath. I went to the United Nations recently. They were having their 3rd annual Open Source Week. PyCon it ain't. We were in a room called the Trusteeship Council. The place was full of open source insiders. Here's John Mad Dog Hall. Dwayne O'Brien about to make a point. The Security Council next door was a lot friendlier. They had these nice dogs checking to see if any of the tourists forgot their sunscreen. Good boy. Good boy. All in all, it was a really neat experience. I'm not sure how much code got written, but open source seems to be about a lot more than just code these days.
Steph, you're the executive director, yes? Of the Open Source Initiative.
Of the Open Source
And we're standing outside.
Yeah.
You went, what floor did you get to yesterday?
AI 27.
Are we saying that? 27th floor? Do you know how many floors are in there?
27.
27? Wait, so you're on the top floor?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
I
So what you're telling me is that open source has made it literally to the highest levels of the United Nations?
The United Nations is cool and all, but the real party was across town. I found this huge expo filled with the latest cameras and gear. And content creators. Open source outsiders galore. Some of them were easier to connect with than others.
I have no idea.
Did you know you have beerware on your phone?
What is that?
Yeah, I want to tell you about it, but this guy...
We're going to a point right now.
All right, Jenna. So you got your iPhone?
Got my
All right, let's pull it out. I have the iPhone, what is this, like a 13 mini? It's got one thing that Samsung doesn't. I'm going to show you what it is. You ready?
Go ahead. Beerware, what's that?
Yeah, beerware license.
As long as you retain the standards, you can do whatever you want with the stuff.
If we meet someday and you think this stuff is worth it, you can buy a beer in return.
Do you think Apple's ever bought this guy a beer? They're using his software with the beerware license.
They should.
You think they should? Open source is a gift. It's a gift to the world.
Absolutely.
It's a gift economy.
Always has been. GitHub. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, an evolution.
Hey, it's closing.
I don't know. I'm just trying to spread the word about it.
You're so smart. I'm saying that I admire that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Or sip on.
Credits at the end of a
It is.
100%.
Yeah.
Spread the
Okay.
word.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Jenna.
let it
Yay.
Boom! Oh, appreciate you.
Thank you. All right.
It's kind of funny how a trip to New York can feel so empty. Even if it's a whirlwind of activity. Maybe especially if it's a whirlwind of activity. I guess not all movement is progress. When we launched the open source pledge, we knew it was going to be divisive. We wanted it to be divisive. The billboards we put up all over San Francisco and the internet were as edgy as we could make them. They screamed David Kramer, to be honest. He's the somewhat pugnacious founder of Sentry, aka my boss.
I don't care if we don't make money, nobody else will.
We definitely got the attention we were looking for, positive and negative. But in my head, there was one voice more than any other telling me that the open source pledge was a terrible idea. That not in a million years would his company ever participate. Another forceful tech personality. Another David. David Heinemeier Hansson. DHH.
Fuck you. I'm not going to do what you tell me to. I reject this notion that open source is in some sort of crisis, that there's a funding crisis, that we have to spend more. No, we don't. There is no crisis.
Sure enough, deep in his recent 6-hour power sesh with Lex Fridman, DHH let loose. He didn't come right out and say that his comments were directed at myself or the pledge. But he also didn't say that they weren't. If the pledge is going to grow, I need to be able to make the case for it, even in the face of stiff opposition from DHH and others. After listening to Lex and David's conversation, yes, the whole thing, I realized it was time for me to decide if I really believe in what I'm saying, what we're saying with the pledge. All companies should pay significant cash money to the maintainers of the open source software they depend on. Kramer believes it. 32 other company founders believe it. Do I believe it? What is an economy? An economy is a system of exchange, a set of rules by which participants can trade goods and services, which is to say, more or less, products and labor, in a predictable, orderly fashion. The one offering products is a producer, by definition, and the one accepting them is a consumer. Participants on both sides feel a certain way about the value of the products they are exchanging, and money is an abstract representation of this value. In order to better understand open source, we're going to look at 5 kinds of economies. And to give ourselves language to discuss economies, I want to start with something called RFC 2119. You see, the internet is also a system of exchange, a set of rules by which nodes on the network can trade data in a predictable, orderly fashion. Since 1969, the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, has used a type of document called a request for comment, abbreviated RFC, to define the rules of the internet, the protocols that participants are expected to follow. Here are some famous examples. RFC 2119 is a 2-page document titled Keywords for Use in RFCs to Indicate Requirement Levels. It's referenced by many other RFCs using language specified in RFC 2119 itself. In this video, the keywords must, should, and may are to be interpreted as described in RFC 2119. Must. This word, or the terms required or shall, mean that the definition is an absolute requirement of the specification. Should. This word, or the adjective recommended, mean that there may exist valid reasons in particular circumstances to ignore a particular item, but the full implications must be understood and carefully weighed before choosing a different course. May. This word, or the adjective optional, mean that an item is truly optional. One vendor may choose to include it, another may not, etc. Let's apply these terms to describe our first kind of economy, the market economy. This is the most familiar one. The rules are something like this. Now, nobody has to be a producer, but if you're going to be a producer, you must offer product, and in a market economy, you must accept money. Same with consumers. No one has to be a consumer, but if you're going to be a consumer, then by definition, in a market economy, you must offer money and accept product. Pretty straightforward, right? If a consumer fails to pay or a producer fails to deliver, the justice system kicks in to enforce the rules. That's what it means that they are hard requirements, not simply recommendations. One particular subset of the market economy is the labor market, where producers, i.e. employees or contractors, must offer their labor and accept money, and employers must offer money and accept labor. Now let's look at a third example. In a barter economy, there is no money involved. Producers must offer product and must accept product. Consumers must also accept product and offer product. To be honest, true barter economies are mostly theoretical. Okay, now let's talk about gift economies. In a gift economy, there's a time delay, so one participant must offer product and the other must receive it, but then later on, the second should turn around and offer product back to the first. The essence of a gift economy is that a gift carries with it an obligation to reciprocate down the line. Reciprocation is not a hard requirement enforced by an abstract justice system, but a social norm enforced through relational influence. This brings us to open source. As with other economies, we say that by definition, producers are those who offer product and consumers are those who accept it. Unlike the other kinds of economies, in open source, there is no expectation that producers must or should accept anything in return. They may accept product, labor, or money, but these are all truly optional, and honestly, that's the way it should be. In practice, basically everyone does accept other product. So like someone building Postgres might use Firefox or LibreOffice, etc. Almost all projects welcome labor if it fits within the vision and bandwidth of the maintainers. A number of projects accept money, but plenty don't, and that's totally fine. It's clearly optional what producers accept in return. Where things break down is in expectations about what consumers should offer in return. Under copyleft licenses like GPL, consumers must reciprocate in certain fairly narrow circumstances, offering any labor expended on a product back to the producers, and by extension the rest of the community. But outside of that, there is no hard requirement for consumers of open source to give back. And there can't be without changing the nature of open source. In terms of RFC 2119, my question is this: may consumers reciprocate for the gift of open source? Or should they? To really put a point on it, should companies pay for the open source that they consume? There is no legal obligation. Is there an ethical obligation? Across the street from Fermata is where Netflix filmed Mindhunter. They were at Bridgetown Tap House and at the old Borough Building. I used to rent an office here for a little web design shop I ran with a friend called ZetaWeb. I still use that email address, chad@zetaweb.com. It was in this office that I first signed up for Gmail in August of 2004, and for Basecamp 3 months later. So this is where I first learned about Ruby on Rails, 37 signals, Jason Fried, and DHH. David told Lex a story about the early days of Rails that explains a lot about his perspective on money and open source.
I faced this almost immediately with Ruby on Rails. As soon as it was released, there were a million people who had all sorts of opinions about where I ought to take it. And not just opinions, but actually demands. Unless you implement an Oracle database adapter, this is always going to be a toy. It was actually more or less that exact demand that prompted me to have a slide at one of the early Rails conferences that just said, fuck you.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm not going to do what you tell me to. I'm here as a bringer of gift. I am sharing code that I wrote on my own time, on my own volition. And you don't have to say thank you. I mean, it'd be nice if you did. You can take the code and do whatever you want with it. You can contribute back if you want, but you can't tell me what to do or where to go or how to act. I'm not a vendor. This is a fundamental misconception that users of open source occasionally step into because they're used to buying software from companies who really care about their business. I care about people using my software. I think it's great. but we don't have a transactional relationship. I don't get something back when you tell me what to do, except grief. And I don't want it, so you can keep it.
A decade later, I was living a few blocks away from the old Borough building. ZetaWeb had fizzled, but GetTip was in full swing. GetTip, or GitIp, later called Gratipay, was a crowdfunding platform I founded with a focus on open source developers, a predecessor to GitHub sponsors, Patreon, etc. Sentry was one of dozens of companies that funded hundreds of developers on the platform. DHH published a blog post at the end of 2013 titled "The Perils of Mixing Open Source and Money." I waded into a Twitter beef with him about it, resulting in a blog post I called Resentment, where I tried to take on board David's critique. This eventually led to a live stream between David and myself.
I love New York City. Oh yeah, New York City. I love New York City. Oh yeah. Hey, David.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Pull the trigger here and blast out a link on Twitter.
All right.
Since we know the sound's working. Good. And, all right, back. Hi.
Cool.
Thanks for doing this.
Sure. I think it's an interesting debate, so it's well worth talking about.
What's your worst nightmare for GitIp and for money and open source? Like, what's the deepest fear? Like, what's the worst that could happen?
I have a lot of fears around how money corrupts things. I think the probably one of the biggest ones is when I started working on Rails back in 2004 when it got released, and sort of that phase after that. I had a famous slide
at one of the early
Canadian Ruby conference that just said "fuck you."
Fuck you.
When somebody else is your boss, when somebody else pays you, even if they don't actually pay you, the funny thing about it is the Rails thing, they went in with the sort of mental attitude as though they had paid me, even though no money had actually changed hands, right?
I was going to ask, so it's not even like, I mean, we saw the case somebody brought up yesterday, Rich Hickey and Clojure, and he had actually accepted money, right? And there was that sense of obligation.
And I think that's where it gets much worse, because for me, it was so easy to dismiss the people in the beginning who were like, I want this, that, and the other thing, treating it as a vendor relationship, because they hadn't given me money.
Right.
If they actually had, if I had actually raised crowdfunding for Rails in the beginning, it would have been a lot fucking harder for me to say, go fuck yourself.
No, yes.
Because now they're a customer. Now the relationship changes. It's no longer peer-to-peer. It's a customer-vendor. I'm buying something from you.
Yeah.
And that's not a great setup for me for open source. I don't like that one effing bit.
Fast forward another decade. In early 2024, I wrote a blog post called "The Open Source Sustainability Crisis." At the end of last year, near the height of the WordPress drama, IEEE quoted me extensively in an article titled "Open Source Software is in Crisis."
But I do want to counter the misconception that open source is somehow in a crisis unless we all start paying for open source. That model already exists. It's commercial software.
I find that often when you just start from one sentence of disagreement, it's easy to overstate differences, and then you dive into specifics, and differences are often dissipated.
The definition of open source sustainability that I'm working with is when anyone can publish widely adopted open source software and be compensated fairly without having to jump through hoops. Our companies are good at sharing code, but maintainers can't eat code. The sustainability crisis is that maintainers are burning out because of the hoops we make them jump through in order to eat and pay rent. I explored this with a group of maintainers at PyCon earlier this year, including Leonard Richardson, author of the popular Python library, Beautiful Soup.
Has anyone experienced burnout on their open source project? Leonard gave a talk about that at the Maintainer Summit last year here at PyCon.
Is there a role for money in that conversation, in that burnout experience?
There is, because a big contributing factor to the burnout was the things that I was doing to earn money. So if those needs had been met some other way, then the stress would have been a lot less.
If you want money for your software, you should just sell it. Or go work for a software company that will employ you to do open source.
These are examples of what I call open source subsidization. They're market economy hacks to feed programmers who are creating value in the spirit of the gift. They're fine as far as they go, but reciprocating properly for the gift is a much simpler solution.
I will say, though, I'm also introspective enough to realize that if it hadn't panned out as well as it did for me on my own business, maybe I would have been more tempted. Maybe if you see other people build huge, successful companies off the back of your work, and you really don't have a pot to piss in, you might be tempted to get a little upset about that. I've seen that in the Rails world as well, where there are people who contributed substantial bodies of work and then got really miffed when they didn't feel like they got enough back. I was fortunate enough that the business that Jason and I built with Ruby on Rails was as successful as it was, and I made the money I needed to make, that I didn't need to chase the rest of it.
You like to race cars, and you do it at a world-class competitive level.
I'm pretty good for the kind of driver I am, which is called the gentleman driver. It's really expensive. It's like having a small startup. You need to fly a bunch of people around the world and buy expensive equipment and so forth. So you need a bunch of capital. And I had some through the success of the company. So I could do it.
I do agree with some of the sort of critique of open source. Well, it is a privilege. Who has the time to work on that? Maybe if there is money involved, there are more people that could have time to do it that otherwise wouldn't have time to do it. I think there's a lot of good intentions there.
I'm not a billionaire, and so freaking what? I got more than enough. I got plenty of my share.
I fought so hard over the years to sort of maintain that. A bunch of the presentations I've given at various Rails cons basically say this, right? Like, I don't want to owe you fucking anything. Because if I owe you something, it's going to corrupt this little bubble I have, this little magic room I can go into where I can just make fantastic, great shit that I really want. And don't burst my little bubble here. I don't get to enjoy it all the time. There's long stretches where, like, I have business obligations. I can't fucking just go into my little Rails bubble and do Rails work. But when I can, it's such a special magic place, and I'm like, don't fucking spill toxic waste on it. And that's me talking mostly to myself, right? Like, I've had so many opportunities to spill toxic waste on my little Rails bubble, and like do it full time, and like VCs wanting to do Rails shit and so on. And I've tried very hard not to, as I talk about it in that article, to cash in on it, right? Like, Rails as an open source thing, there's plenty of opportunities to cash in on it. Yeah. And it's been tempting at times.
I mean, I know that temptation. When you sit as the head of a very important project, you know that comes with a great degree of power. And you really need a great degree of discipline to rein that in and not exercise that power at every step where you feel aggrieved. I've felt aggrieved 1,000,000 times over in the 20 plus years of Ruby on Rails. I've really tried very hard not to let those sometimes petty, sometimes substantial grievances over time seep in to the foundation of the ecosystem and risk ruining everything.
Like, of course, when you look at something, hey, here's some value, here's some people who want to give you money.
Right.
Like, who's going to fucking say no to people wanting to give you money?
Money matters when you don't have it, right?
Right, and I think that's part of that pyramid. And I think you're right in that sense, that maybe these concerns only really factor in once you're at the top of the pyramid of Maslow's needs. Like, once you have covered, like, the first thing to have covered, you got to have shelter, you got to have fucking food and so forth. Once that's covered, like, then you can worry about something else. But I totally understand, like, hey, let's try to cover those things first, and then maybe it's a luxury to worry about these things later. And I accept that. I accept that the concerns I have are concerns about self-actualization and what happens sort of at that level when we've already fulfilled all these other things.
People need about $70,000 to $100,000 per year of income in order to climb Maslow's pyramid from survival to self-actualization. I wish David were excited about unlocking this possibility for open source developers without making them jump through hoops. I wish I could make him see the elegance and beauty of a system in which companies reciprocate for the gift of open source, not just with code, but with cash. But he isn't. And I can't. My call with David in 2013 was a high point for GitTip. For me, it was a triumph of human connection, rising above the vitriolic pressures of the internet. GitTip reached its true peak 2 months later at our first in-person company retreat. A month after that, riding high from these twin peaks, I waded into another GitTip-adjacent Twitter beef. This time between a top GitTip user and someone who resented her as a panhandler. I tried a little too hard to get the two sides to work out their differences on a video call, like I had done with David. Both sides recoiled in terror. Many GitTip users were shocked that I would treat this resentful Twitter user with anything other than contempt. The significant contingent of GitTip users stopped trusting me, stopped promoting the platform, and started scrutinizing my every online move. After 4 months, the situation had deteriorated so badly that I chose to publish a post called "I Resent You," and the offended contingent began actively leaving the platform. A month later, in mid-July 2014, right as my family was arriving at our summer vacation destination, I got a call from the organizer of the PyOhio conference, which was coming up a week after vacation. According to people he was listening to, I had become a danger to the community. He uninvited me from giving the keynote. I miss the easygoing way I was able to interact online before GitTip unraveled. On the other hand, I empathize a lot more now with people who are afraid of being vulnerable online, including the two people I tried to convince to join a call back in February of 2014. Video calls are of course pervasive now, but public discourse sure hasn't gotten any more ironic. I long ago stopped believing in the possibility of a fully inclusive community. I'm now more interested in a community with clear boundaries and a clear story about how to be gracious to outsiders. I long ago stopped thinking of myself as a member of the open source community. I've shifted my identity elsewhere. And yet here I am, responsible to grow the open source pledge. To make the case in the face of stiff opposition that companies should reciprocate with code and with cash to open source maintainers. I'm going to need to rebuild some of my belief in the open source community. I'm going to need to get to know some maintainers again. Not just online, but in person. Wish me luck. Whew! All right, there and back again. What do you think? Honestly, this episode was really cathartic for me to make. Going back to my old office and my old house, especially driving back to that farmhouse. It was a good opportunity to let go of some stuff, you know? So where do we go from here? I want to meet maintainers and share their stories. I want to meet founders and leaders of open source pledge member companies. We've got the beginnings of a great little community with the pledge. And honestly, after making this episode, I'm genuinely excited for where we go with it in a way that I haven't been before. So thanks for watching and being a part of it. If you think your company should join the Open Source Pledge, maybe share this video with your leadership team and let me know how I can help you make the case and get your company onboarded. Now you should probably take a break and go outside, but if you're looking for something to watch next, here is David's conversation with Lex, here is his conversation with me back in the day, and here are the first 2 episodes of Open Path. Bye for now.